Okay, so I wanted to start off today with a quick recap of what we talked about in our last lesson. And the reason I want to do this is because these things are the fundamental building blocks of our security or of our firewall. So they are really the fundamental building blocks that we use to create security policies, and really they are the foundations for the configuration of our firewall. So we're going to talk about zones, and then after that we're going to talk about policies. So the Juniper device that we are using, which is the SRX, it is what's known as a zone-based firewall. Most firewalls nowadays are zone-based, and the concept is that we create this thing called a zone, and everything that's in a zone shares the same security requirements. And what we then do is we create policies to say what is allowed from one zone into another zone. Okay, so that's our basic concept. And let's just get into this a little bit, and we'll talk about what we typically have set up for zones. So we're going to take a look at the purpose for zones, types of zones, how do we use them, and how to configure them. It's actually quite easy to configure these. I think a lot of the main point, or the main thing about when we get into this topic of security and so on, the main thing is we need to understand what tools are available to us to create a firewall, to create policies, and to control access into different areas of our organization, to understand what the tools are that we have available. But the other thing is to have a clear picture of what we are trying to achieve with these tools. And what is our goal? So we're going to sort of come back to that. I'm going to go through and look at these concepts first, which are the building blocks for our firewall. So we're going to define zones. Well, it's a collection of one or more network segments sharing identical security requirements, which is a pretty good description. So what we do is we have a zone, and within that we have networks. We can have one network, we can have more networks. But the main point is that all those networks have exactly the same security requirements. Now, just to give an example of that, in our campus right here at ACIT IFTV Lakes, our firewall predominantly we have 3 zones that we actually use. There is another zone which does just one thing, but don't worry about that. 3 zones that we use. One of the zones is called the untrusted zone. So really that's the internet. And the reason it's called untrusted is because, well, that's a factory default setting that Juniper put on their device, and it was just convenient to keep using it. You could have changed it. I mean, you can change the name. You could have changed it to, let's call it the internet zone, let's call it the external zone. But we just left it as it was, and that's fine. The other zone that we have is a zone called classrooms. Now, that means that all the devices that really are involved in the classrooms, anything that is used by students, resides in that zone. So, so we've got the untrusted zone, which is internet connection out there. We've got the classroom zone, which is sort of everything that students use. Then we've got the admin zone, which is kind of like the college administration. So we've got, well, the computers and the servers and everything that reside within that particular zone. So why do we do that? Well, because we know that in the untrusted, everything out there on the internet, well, that's all got the same security requirements. In other words, we don't trust any of it. Okay, it's all the same. Don't trust any of it. The classrooms, well, pretty much for the stuff that students get to use, it's all pretty much got the same security requirement. In that, we need to allow some access. We need to allow access from within that zone out into the internet. So anything from in that zone can get out to the internet. We pretty much allow that. We need to allow some things from the outside to come in. So we need to allow some connectivity to come into that zone. We also have our admin zone. And the reason we have the admin zone is because the admin zone has a different security requirement to the classroom zone, which means that we don't want students to be able to access the stuff that's in the admin zone. Okay, so it has a different security requirement as far as access to that network is to be restricted to people who use the resources and are supposed to be using the resources that are in that particular zone. And we needed to put a policy so that access from the classroom zone was limited into the admin zone, but access from the admin zone was unlimited into the classroom zone, so that teachers and so on can go and set up resources and configure servers and do what they need to do in that zone. So when we're talking about zones, to start with, we're going to look at different types of zones, but when you're really configuring these things, the idea is to think about right from the beginning, okay, what are my requirements? What type of security issues am I trying to solve? And then once you take a look at that, you'll then start to configure what different types of zones that you need. For example, you might have an organisation that has got a mail server. And the mail server is hosted internally within the organisation, but people from outside the organisation, like staff, like workers and so on, will need to access their mail server from outside the organisation. So there are certain protocols that you will want to allow in. So you might also have a web server in the organisation, and people from outside might want to access your web server because maybe they need to process sales orders, maybe they need to do other sorts of information, process some other kind of transactional information within your organisation. So people from inside will need to access it, but maybe you've got salespeople out on the road, working wherever, remotely, that need to access it and put orders in and process customer requirements and so on into a web server where you're running some type of application. So that's a security requirement as well. Okay, but the thing is, the security requirement for the web server is different to the security requirement for the mail server, because they need to have access from the outside world, but with different protocols. One will use SMTP, and the others using HTTP, HTTPS to access. And so they have different security requirements because they both need access, but they need access with different protocols. So it could make sense to put them in different zones, because then you would configure access into one zone for the protocol that was needed by that server, and access to the other zone for the protocols that are needed from the other server. So when we're talking about zones, we're going to look at different types of zones. But the thing is, the important thing is to think about right from the start, what do I need to achieve with my policy? What am I trying to achieve? So first of all, we have security policies control transit traffic between zones. So as traffic moves from one zone to another, the policies are going to control that. There is this thing called a null zone. You need to be aware what that is. There's a thing called a null zone. A null zone is really the default zone. And the way the null zone works is that everything is in the null zone. Unless you put it somewhere else, unless you create a zone and put network segments into a zone that you create, if you don't do that, everything is in the null zone. And the thing about the null zone is that it is the default zone and it drops all traffic. Okay, that's a pretty important point. If you've got interfaces that are in the null zone, then nothing is going in or out of those interfaces. Okay? Zip. Nothing's going anywhere. So, here's the thing, when we create security zones, and we create interfaces that we're going to be using for various purposes, we can make sure we put those interfaces into the appropriate zone. Interfaces can pass and accept traffic only if assigned to non-null zones, which is kind of what I just said. There is an exception, which is an interface like FXP. The FXP interface is a management interface. Now, we don't actually have FXPs on our devices because the branch devices don't have it. It's the higher end devices do have it. But if you do have it, you don't need to put it in the zone. That's kind of the point. Why is that? Well, because it's what's known as an out-of-band interface, in that it doesn't pass transit traffic. Its only purpose in life is for you to put an IP address on it so that you can log into it with SSH and configure the device. That's all it's there. So it doesn't need to be in the zone for that reason. Now, some of you may experience this null zone phenomenon when you did something like set a factory default configuration and didn't put your interfaces into a particular zone. Or maybe you did put it in the zone, but it was in a zone that said nothing's getting in here. Okay. Maybe that was a policy. Maybe you had a policy that said that. So the thing is, it's very important, and this is something that you can kind of miss it if you're not thinking about it. And I'll demonstrate the importance of this as we go and look at some actual configurations and so on. So let's get into just the packet flow, how the packet flows through, the packets flow through our device. They come in, we have a match on a session. What we've already discovered is that this is a stateful firewall, meaning that we set up a session, we set up an outgoing path and an ingoing path. And basically, stateful firewall, as we discovered, means that if the policy allows the initial connection out, the policy will also allow the return traffic as well. So it's just by default allow the return traffic for a session. Okay, so we looked at that last week. There is a strict hierarchy of linking between zones and interfaces. So it's essentially what we are going to do is we're going to put interfaces into a zone. And just to be clear on that, we're talking about logical interfaces. Why do I make that point? Well, because a physical interface can have many logical interfaces. Okay? Many logical interfaces on the same physical interface. As we know, when we did our CCNA, they were called sub-interfaces, but as we discovered in Juniper, they're just called units. Unit 0, Unit 1, Unit 2, etc. So they're called logical interfaces. So you can assign logical interface to a zone, but you can't assign them to multiple zones. So you can't have an interface being in more than one zone. That's a con. Of course, you can have a logical interface unit 0 on a physical interface in one zone and another logical interface on the same physical interface in another zone. Yes, you can do that. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to be assigning interfaces to the zones that we create, and thereby we are then putting network segments into those zones, because of course our interfaces are attached to a network segment, and therefore that network segment then becomes part of that zone. We can assign a logical interface to a routing instance, as we know. We can't assign a logical interface to multiple routing instances. So a logical interface can only be in one zone. It can also only be in one routing instance. And all the zone logical interfaces must belong to the same routing instance. So here we have a routing instance with interfaces in it. Those interfaces can be in different zones. So we have two routing instances. What I'm saying is that the instances, the interfaces in one instance can't belong. I guess what I'm saying is we can't have different routing instances in the same zone. So we can't have this instance here and that instance there, but their interfaces belonging to the same zone. They have to be in the same routing instance. Okay, so let's take a little bit of a look at that. Here we have a forwarding table. We've got 4 zones right there, and we've got a couple of routing instances. That's fine, because all the interfaces in the instance are in the same zone. Sorry, all the interfaces in the zone are in the same instance, that's what I meant to say. And we can have the interfaces in the routing instance in different zones, but we can't have interfaces from instance 1 and instance 2 in zone B, for example. They have to, all the interfaces in a zone must belong to the same routing instance. Okay, so look at zone types. User defined, they're the ones we've been talking about. We've really have been talking about security zones. These are the ones that you're really going to be working with. There is another zone type called a functional zone. There's only ever one of those, and it's called the management zone. And the only reason we use that is you put management interfaces into that zone and set up security policies for that. So there's only ever one functional zone. You have multiple security zones. And then we will talk about this default null zone that's just already exists. So security zones are so one or more network segments requiring regulation of inbound and outbound traffic through the use of policies. So we're going to, the purpose of zones is that we're going to put network segments into the zone so that we can control what gets between those segments. We're going to control the traffic that gets between those segments. That's why we're creating these zones. There is within a zone, we also get to filter any traffic that's destined to the device itself. So if I've got an interface in a zone and I'm making an SSH connection into that interface, I have to actually permit SSH traffic into the zone itself. And note here that intrazone and interzone transit traffic requires security policies. That's a good point. One of the things that we've got in our firewall configuration here in our classroom, we've actually got 2 different network segments. And if we want traffic to go between those network segments, we have to put a policy in the zone that says traffic is allowed within the zone. So what traffic is allowed to go within the zone itself between network segments? There's actually a policy for that. So you can control that. You can control what happens even inside the zone. So by default, if we just clear the configuration altogether, there's no security zones defined. Looked at the routing instances already. Okay, so the functional zone, there really is only one. It's called management. It's used for out-of-band device management. We don't really configure policies in there. It doesn't pass traffic. Set the zone. Often we talk about the null zone, which is a default zone. Can't configure that. If you delete an interface from another zone, it just returns back into the null zone. That's where it ends up. And the main point of that is that any interfaces that are in the null zone will not pass traffic. Okay, so nothing gets in or out. There is we can configure a zone called Junos host zone. And that's where we, again, just used to control traffic that is going to the device itself. If we need more control over the traffic that goes to the device itself, we can create this zone. You don't have to, it's optional. I personally haven't never created it, but there would be maybe situations where you just need more control over what traffic gets into that particular device, and you can set up this thing called a host zone. And an example of configuration right there. when you go to load the factory default, it actually does create it actually puts a policy in place. So the factory default actually does create zones, and actually does create security zones, creates two, and it actually does create policies as well. Okay, so if I have no configuration at all, the only zone I've got on there is the null zone. That's it. If I go and put the factory default on, I end up with two zones. One's called trust, one's called untrust. And essentially the way that factory default works is that we've got VLAN 0 sitting in the trust. I think we've got interface, actually no we do, interface G 000, whether it's FE or G depending on the device, but interface 000 ends up in the untrust zone. It's just the way it turns out. And the default policy actually is that everything's allowed from trust to untrust, and nothing is allowed from trust back to trust. We'll take a look at that later on. Zone configuration. So define a security or a functional zone. Normally you are defining a security zone. That's normally what you're doing. We're going to put some interfaces into the zone. We then add services and protocols that need permission into the device itself. The good point here, if you don't do that, then nothing gets into the device. In other words, you won't be able to connect to it to manage it. If you've got interfaces in a zone that you're planning to connect to, let's just say we've decided to interface GE or FE000, we're going to use it for management. That's exactly what we're doing with our labs. That's our management interface. But we forgot to put it into a zone. We'll never be able to connect to it. If we did put it in the zone, but then we didn't configure in the zone that we're actually allowing SSH traffic in, we still won't be able to connect to it. Or if we didn't say what we're allowing, we still won't be able to connect to it. So it is important that we get that set up right. Let's take a look at that shortly. So some of the steps to define a zone is we're going to go into configuration mode, we're going to set security zone, and then we give it a name. Okay, so we could set up a function. As I said, most of the time you will be setting up a security zone. Give it a name, whatever, admin, you might call it mail server. Put the mail server, maybe you call it web server. Maybe it's a zone, you're going to put your web server, whatever it is. Just give it a name that is meaningful to the situation. And once we've got our zone set up here, we'll put our interfaces into our zone. So we may know that this particular zone, HR, who it is, we might have our HR department set up over here on GE001.0, for example. So we have configured GE001.0 with to be the default gateway for our HR department. Okay, so our HR department is in that zone. So we'll put that interface in that zone. Okay. And we can do the same for the functional zones. You also get to put interfaces as well. So a security device doesn't allow traffic destined to itself by default. So if you try to telnet, ping, SSH into the device, no, sorry, you cannot connect. So we need to overcome that problem. And we need to overcome that problem by configuring the zone to allow traffic into it. And this is how we do that. The command is host inbound traffic, and we'll do system services, or we can do protocols. Here's an example here of what we can let in. We can let in SSH, DNS, ping, etc. We can just say all. We can specify, use the any service option, which basically it opens all the ports, basically, essentially. When I say any service, all the ports are open. So they're all open. With the any service, all, it does allow a service to come in on their respective ports. So any services absolutely opens everything up. What you normally do is you don't normally do that. You normally decide what you want to let into your zone. Protocols here, these are our routing protocols and other protocols that might be associated with routing functions. And there's some examples there. We've got BGP, LDP, OSPF, RIP, and so on. BFD, bidirectional forwarding detection as well. So there's a few other things there. So these are protocols we're talking about there. If we want to allow everything except something, we'll accept a few things. We can say all except. We can do that as well. One way of doing it. This is allowing all here. So you can configure this statement at the zone level. So right at the top of the zone, this is an example: set security zone, HR, host inbound traffic system services all. So everything's allowed to that zone. I wouldn't recommend doing that, by the way, especially if this was the interface to your HR zone. Not at all. You might do something like that if that was maybe it was the IT management zone, where the IT management maybe needed to get protocols in, but even then wouldn't really want to put all. So what you can also do with a zone is you can configure host inbound policies on an interface. Okay, the important point about that is, so you can put something at the top level of the zone, and you go down onto an interface and put something different. And the main point about that is that the interface configuration overrides the zone. Okay, so in this instance here, if I said at the zone level, we're going to allow everything. We've got an all right there, but then down on the interface, I say I am going to allow HTTP. Okay, now if there happens to be only one interface in that zone, then realistically all that's getting into that zone is HTTP on that one interface. Okay. But if you have multiple interfaces, you can say, oh, HTTP on this one, I'm going to allow ping on that one, I'm going to allow SSH on another one, whatever you want. We can have multiple protocols on different interfaces, so it's totally flexible. Main point is that the interface configuration overrides, or basically trumps, if you like, the zone level configuration. It will supersede the zone level configuration. So here's an example here where we've got security zones, security zones HR, host inbound traffic, system services, telnet and FTP, and we've got two interfaces in that zone. Now there is no specific host inbound traffic configured on the interfaces. So the interfaces will inherit the configuration that's on the zone because there's nothing specific on them. So the that configuration allows telnet and FTP to come in to the device itself on those interfaces. This configuration, however, is a little different because on this configuration, one of the interfaces, which is GE001, has got a specific configuration on it. So the consequences of that is that interface 000.0 will inherit the zone level configuration, so telnet and FTP, whereas interface 001 will be limited to only SNMP. Okay, and you can't telnet in on 001 or FTP in on 001. You can the only protocol that gets in is SNMP, which is a management protocol. Okay. So here we go, let's look at this situation here where we have got a zone level configuration, system services all, telnet except. So what's happening here is everything except telnet is allowed at the zone level. Then we go down and we look at, we've got two interfaces here, one does have a specific configuration and one doesn't for host inbound traffic, and the consequences of that is that we've got everything except HTTP and FTP on interface 001. So interface 000, everything except telnet, 001, everything except HTTP and FTP. It's just more specific. So more specific totally overrides the high level, less specific configuration. In other words, we are not going to get telnet in on 001. Just because it's up here in the zone, sorry, that's more specific, it's going to override that. Okay, so we can monitor the security and do a show security zones, and we can go and take a look at the zones and the interfaces that are in them. We can also take a look at what traffic is permitted into the zones. So we can do a show interfaces extensive. Once we do that, we will actually see what zone the interface is in. This one's in the trust zone, as it happens, and this is the host inbound traffic will be shown there as well. And we can also go and view the actual traffic that's coming in or out of the zone. Right, so we look at zones, set purpose, define types of zones, explain the application of zones, and describe the zone configuration. What I want to do several review questions here, and then we'll give you a demonstration of a firewall with zones configured. Just have a bit of a look at that. So first of all, what's the purpose of a zone? Purpose of a zone? Well, what are we going to use these zones for?
What is the purpose?
Purpose of a zone.
It's a set of interfaces with the same security requirement.
Exactly. So it's the network segments that have the same security requirement going in a zone. So when you're planning this, you're going to have to think about, right from the start, what are the security requirements for the organization that you're planning this firewall for, or to be building this firewall for. So, we don't just charge in and start putting it. We do our research, we find out, we understand, we consult, we understand what's happening, how the organization's working, what's going on, where the security risks might lie, what are the concerns, and then we think about how we build our solution for this particular situation, and we think, I'm going to have a zone for this, a zone for that, a zone for that. Start thinking about what type of zones you're going to do. You think, well, actually, all these segments have the same security requirement. I just put them all in the same zone. I don't need multiple zones for that because they all have the same requirements. So maybe you put them all in the same zone. So those type of things. They're the things you're thinking about. What zone types exist in the security device? We talked about 3 types actually. Talked about security zones, obviously. What are the other 2?
Functional zone.
There's a functional zone
and
a null zone. Exactly. Functional and null. What is necessary to configure a zone? Well, there's basically 3 things you need to do. We need to create the zone. So set security zones. Security zone, give it a name. Then we want to put some interfaces in it that need to be in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you're going to say host inbound traffic. Host inbound traffic. Which is kind of what we covered in point 4. Right, let's take a look at some zones real quick, then we'll take a break, and then we'll go and do a recap of our security policies. So what I want to do here is just get that off the screen. Open this up. Here we go. Let's open this. Just going to log in here, and we'll take a look at. Let's log in as me. So let's take a look at some zones. Just going to show security zones. And on this, on our firewall, we have a zone called admin. This little next line here, send reset for non-sync session TCP packets off. That is a security thing. Well, actually, what it is because a session times out if there's no activity. So a TCP session will time out after 30 minutes of non-activity. What can happen is the session's been pulled out of the firewall, but the endpoints are still trying to send traffic, and it's not happening because there's no session. It's just not going anywhere. So if I turn this to on, then what the firewall's going to do when it gets traffic that is not async traffic, in other words, if the endpoints were creating a new session, you'd get a sync, you'd get a sync ACK, and you'd get an ACK. Okay? So what we're saying is we're getting traffic, but we're not creating a new session. We're just trying to send traffic to an existing session that no longer exists. Then if we turn this to on, what our device is going to do is going to send a message to the endpoint saying, send me a reset. Or no, sorry, it will send a reset message to the endpoint saying, reset the session. And then the endpoint will hopefully go, oh, I need to reset the session, and it will then send a new sync and do its three-way handshake and create a new session. So that's all that does. This just kind of can overcome a problem of devices losing their session. Anyway, policy configurable. Yes, interface is bound. There's one. There it is. VLAN 100. So that's our VLAN 100. It's the only interface that's in the admin zone. You'll notice it's a logical interface. Okay, it's a VLAN interface. They're all going to be logical interfaces. Here's our classrooms. We've got two interfaces, and they are VLAN 40 and 41. Okay, so why is that? Well, we have two network segments in that zone. VLAN 40 and 41. 41 what's on VLAN 40? If you haven't looked at that yet, you will. You haven't yet. We have another zone, which is, this is our VPN zone. This is where a VPN comes in, and it's got its own little thing going on there in that zone. Same thing that zone does. We have got a trust zone, which we actually don't use for anything because we don't even use VLAN 0. So it's just sitting there doing nothing at the moment. And here is our untrust zone, and we've got three interfaces in there. FE007.0 unit 0, PP00, and ST00. All logical interfaces in that zone. Okay. And there's a security zone called GNOS host, and there's nothing in there at all. Just nothing. That's the default GNOS host zone. There's nothing in there. Not used. Okay. Any questions about what we're looking at on the screen there? No questions? Okay. That's all good. Let's take a look at, let's do a detail. Get some detailed information about our zones. Anything else we're going to see there? Nothing much else to show actually. Let's do a show interfaces. Ooh. Let's do PP0. Oops. Right, 0.0 extensive, and we pull that up. I'm just looking for some zone information here. Lots of inbound and outbound stuff there. Here it is. There's my security zone. So it tells me it's in the untrust zone. Excuse me. And here we are. Allow and host inbound traffic. HTTP and IKE. HTTPS and IKE is what we're allowing into that interface. And that's it. So that's our traffic in. So really, basically those two bits of information there are configured at the zone level. So, why do you think, by the way, that that interface is sitting in the untrust zone? What might that interface be doing? Huh? Why do you think the interface PP0.0 is sitting in the untrust zone? What do you think that zone might be for, and what do you think that interface might be doing? Well, what is the purpose of this interface, PP0.0? What is that doing, do you think? Let's have a bit of a look at. Let's look at show interfaces, and we'll get to it. There it is. There. It's that interface there. What's that interface doing?
Nothing?
Yeah, it's doing something. It's got my IP address on it. That's my internet connection.
Oh, yeah.
Huh? That's my internet connection.
Which one is the public address? The second one, yeah?
That's our public IP address there. That there, that's the IP address of the other end. That's the ISP's IP address. Okay. So that is really where all of our traffic is sent. So our route, our static route, basically says send all traffic to here. Okay. Which is at the ISP. That's the ISP's router's interface address that we're connected to.
Do you have a static route to reach that one?
Yeah. Yeah. There is. Show route protocol static. There it is there. See that?
Alright.
It's the same as that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So there it is. So again, the question is, it's our internet connection, and it's sitting in the untrust zone. Okay. So what kind of policies might we have on that zone? We'll get to that. We'll take a look at that and let you think about that for now. Alrighty, guys. So we've had a look at zone. Looked at why we might put certain interfaces in certain zones. We'll get to this other interface as well, which is, you might have noticed, was also in the untrust zone, and we might get to think about why is that in the untrust zone. We'll get to that. And the other interface that was in the untrust zone was this one here, that one right there, FE007. Okay, why is that in the untrust zone? Well, if we go to face E, and we've got 7, I've got a dot 0 on that, yeah. And if we went like that, look at that there, encapsulation, PPP over Ethernet. Okay, so what we're doing is, this is the physical interface that is associated with the logical interface PP0.0. Okay, so that's why that is also in the untrust zone, because in reality the network traffic is coming through this physical interface. Okay, because PP0.0 is a logical interface, so we need to associate it with a physical interface where the actual cable plugs into that connects me to the internet. Okay, which is this one here, and that's why it's got that encapsulation. Okay, so that's why that's also in the untrust zone. Right, guys, so a bit of a look at zones, interfaces, why things are in certain zones, etc. Let's take a break, and then we're going to do a recap of security policies, and then we're going to take a look at some examples of security policies. So we'll take a break at this point.